Never before in video games or even movies alike has a fictional character made smoking seem so cool. I'm not condoning smoking, kids, so don't smoke. But man, does Big Me make it look cool. Hey everyone, Divvy here. It is Halloween, so I felt like out of all the games that I was playing all month, I was playing an awful lot of Halloween related games, whether they be horror games or games that had horror elements to them or scary things about them. And I was playing them throughout the month, and some of them included the DLC for Infamous 2, which is Festival of Blood, BioShock, Dead Space. But out of all of them, I felt like the one that was suitable to actually review on Halloween was the one that had the most mythological approach to stories that you would often tell yourselves around Halloween time. And that was, of course, The Wolf Among Us, which is another episodic game from Telltale Games. And I felt like I should get dressed for the occasion. I got my tie, got my white shirt, dressed up just like Big B. I just won't turn into a rampaging monster at will, although that would be pretty cool. But that's not why I'm here. I'm here to specifically review The Wolf Among Us, which, like I said, is Telltale's other outing besides their Walking Dead property. And much like Walking Dead, it is an episodic game that goes through 5 episodes in one season. Whether or not there's going to be a second season, I'm not entirely sure right now. I don't know if maybe they have confirmed it or not. I'll have to double check. But it is 5 episodes that tell the story of Big B Wolf, who is actually the big bad wolf from those fairy tale stories of the Red Riding Hood and the Three Little Pigs. And he's not the only fairy tale creature that has now lived among us in the real world. You also got Snow White, you also got the Magic Mirror, you also got Ichabod Crane. You got all these different fables residing within New York City. And they're all living peacefully, trying to make ends meet, trying to survive, but they need to maintain their cover using this thing called glamour, which is like a potion that makes them seem human. But being that there's some fairy tale creatures that are a little luckier than others in terms of finances, it makes coming across glamour a little bit more difficult. And that's one of the social aspects about this story that I really did appreciate. That's actually kind of relevant, and it really did dig that about the story. But the main plot of this whole thing is that out of nowhere somebody starts murdering some of these fables, and it is up to Bigby, who is the sheriff of the entire community, to figure out who did it and why. Now, even though I just said that this is also from Telltale's who brought us The Walking Dead Seasons 1 and 2, this actually felt quite different from those Walking Dead games, because the Walking Dead games are all about making decisions that impact the characters that you surround yourself with and also have an effect on how certain events are going to transpire in the future episodes. Whereas this is an actually straightforward detective story, meaning your decisions will affect more your investigation to figuring out what's going on rather than whether or not somebody will live or die. It's nothing that focuses too much on moral quandaries, more so as to investigation and cunning and trying to figure out how to solve this murder mystery. And that's what I really dug about Wolf Among Us, is that they didn't forcefully try to replicate the things that worked for The Walking Dead, but because those are things that would only work for The Walking Dead, as opposed to a story like the one that we find here in The Wolf Among Us. They actually developed the story with a different mindset, and I think that worked in their favor for this game, because it is a very thrilling and compelling story that takes various twists and turns like any detective story should, and it's filled with an awful lot of complex characters. There's several characters here that, sure, some of them you may not have having a good chance to get to know, and they weren't developed all that well, but they have characteristics about them that make you go, wow, I might not like this character, but I understand what they're coming from. One of the good examples of this is the main character, Big B Wolf. He was formerly known as the Big Bad Wolf, and we all know that the Big Bad Wolf is the villain of many stories, Red Riding Hood and Three Little Pigs, to name a couple. But in this story, he is the protagonist. He's the good guy. He's the one who wants to escape his past and turn over a new leaf. But some people just simply just don't trust him because of his animalistic behavior. And so I dig that. I really like the arc that they gave this character, trying to trying to portray a better image of himself, while at the same time that beast inside him wants to come out, sometimes literally at any given moment. And of course, what makes Bigby more complex is the fact that this is the character that you get to control. So this is the guy that you make choices with. This is the guy that you talk through. But he's not the only one who also has some complexity to him. Various of the supporting characters are neat little twists to the fables that you know from the stories you read when you were a kid. They're different this time. They have this backstory that you never thought would be the case, and adds a new dimension. And just like any good detective story, there's plenty of twists and turns. And what I mostly liked, I mean, sure, there's a couple of parts where I'm like, I wish I could know more about this, but I gotta keep in mind that sometimes you need to be realistic even when the story involves fairy tale creatures. And what I'm trying to get to is that, like any other detective story, not everything ties up or wraps up neatly with a nice little bow. There's certain things that I'm not going to say are unexplained, but they are left open for interpretation. And there's things that weren't the focal point. Like the main story does get wrapped up, but there's certain details that you go, wait, what about this? What about that? And surely it's something that we're going to have to wait until season 2. But I do appreciate that they didn't actually forcefully try to connect everything together to the point where it wouldn't make sense. Now, because I'm reviewing the entire season, I'm not going to walk through every single detail for every episode, but let's just say that there's a couple of moments where I felt like they were repeating just a tad bit, especially during episodes 3 and 4 and partially in 5 when there's a scene involving almost every character that you've interacted with up until that point. And it looked like that scene was just dragging on just a little too long. Unfortunately, something happens before I was about to formally complain about that scene going on for too long. And certain moments like that also happen in like episode 3 or 4. I can't remember 100%. But there's certain moments where they're kind of saying the same thing. And I remember that being a complaint of mine in season 2 of The Walking Dead, where it's like, okay, you're saying the same thing over and over, let's progress. But fortunately, they don't drag it on to where it hinders the momentum and the pacing of the story. And it all leads up to a rather great finale in episode 5. Not only with an amazing fight that I just couldn't get over. I mean, sure, this is a Telltale game, so you're not going to have that much control over your movement, but let's just say that this fight was a spectacle to witness. It did remind me of a particular fight in a science fiction sequel that I'm not going to mention, but let's just say that this is a science fiction trilogy that a lot of people love the first movie, and then the two latter movies are like, okay. But anyways, it reminded me an awful lot of a particular fight in that trilogy. And it's actually one of my favorite scenes out of that trilogy, and I'm glad that they kind of took their own interpretation of that fight in this. And I thought it was epic. I thought if there was anything to save up for the final episode of the season, it was this. As well as a very ambiguous ending that just left me guessing. Didn't fully explain, didn't leave you going, yes, that we're leaving it at a cliffhanger, but we're just going to give you a hint as to what may come in the future and what certain things that were there this entire time may have meant. My only actual complaint about the story is that there's an emotional gut punch during literally the last frame of episode 1 that made me go, oh, it's this kind of game. And that made me, that took my feelings about episode 1 from really liking it to loving it. I mean, sure, it was a tragedy to have witnessed that, but it at least invoked emotion in me that made me go, wow, you have balls. Only to pull a Marvel in episode 2 and kind of undo it. Sure, there's a bit of a silver lining to them undoing this gut punch that happened in episode 1 that stayed there for the rest of the season, and I appreciate it because it involved something that I was enjoying about the whole story, about the whole deal with season 1 of Wolf Among Us. But it's just a shame that they pulled in Marvel and undid it, and so they took away that kind of took away from the gravity of that gut punch that was at the end of episode 1. Now, I did say that the story was very different from what Telltale usually does with The Walking Dead, but that wasn't the only thing that was different. The art style is also completely different. The art style for The Walking Dead was based more on the comics, where it's a little bit muted in color, but it also has like certain textures about it, and it was still cel shaded. This is also cel shaded, much like The Walking Dead, but it's much more colorful and vibrant and looks more like a straight up graphic novel. And to be honest, I love it. I kind of prefer the art style for The Wolf Among Us more so than The Walking Dead. I still enjoy the artwork that we get in The Walking Dead, but it was in Wolf Among Us that there were certain moments where I would just look around and be like, my God, I'm literally walking through a panel of a comic book, and it looks gorgeous. The voice work is magnificent as well, with a few people there returning from previous Telltale games, more notably from The Walking Dead as well, and everybody does an amazing job. The soundtrack is great too. It's the same composer from The Walking Dead video games, but this time he uses more I can't say the word, synthesizers to deliver this 80s-like type of neo-noir soundtrack that, man, I just love hearing in the background. And this all adds up to making me feel like if this was to be adapted into a live-action movie, hypothetically speaking, you know who would be perfect to direct it? Nicholas Winding Refn. And he is the guy who directed Drive with Ryan Gosling. And he also recently did Only God Forgives, which I heard was kind of but he has that style. Actually, the most recent thing he's done is the Matthew McConaughey Lincoln commercials. Okay, it's kind of appropriate, you know. I should dressed up like this. I should probably go and do a parody of that. Why did the big bad wolf knock down the three little pigs' house? Why does anybody do anything to survive? To bring balance to the miracle of life. Oh my God, Matthew McConaughey is turning into Christopher Walken. My only problems with the presentation is that, you know, that's just straight up being nitpicky, but I feel like what I like to call the bookends of each episode, which is the whole, you know, previously on The Wolf Among Us and then next time on The Wolf Among Us, those segments, they showed bits that either never showed up in the episode, which kind of makes sense because, like I said, these things come. I played it from one week to another because by the time I started, all 5 episodes were already out, so that wasn't that big of a deal for me, and I was able to pick up on this. But for those of you who were playing it as it was released, there's like 2 or 3 months in between each episode, and in those months, chances are they cut some stuff out or they modify something. You know, they change the framing of a shot or whatever. And so whenever they said next time on the Wolf Among Us, sometimes they would have shots or scenes that never made it into the final cut of that next episode. And sometimes when we did get to that next episode, the previously on the Wolf Among Us segment would sometimes feature clips that they didn't really do, like they don't really have anything to do with the main thing that happened in that one episode that's coming up. And I'm like, okay, I really don't feel a really good sense of connection with these bookends, like I like to call them. And the other thing is that I felt like, I don't know how long it took them to release episode 5 after 4, and I keep in mind that they were also working on The Walking Dead season 2 at this time. But I feel like episode 5 was a little rushed in its presentation. Not only were there a few frame rate issues that I never really took notice of in the previous episodes, but I definitely noticed them here because they were very prevalent. But also there were certain moments where there would be a button mashing QuickTime event. And usually at the end of this QuickTime event in previous episodes, there would be a second button that you have to press in order to pull off that whole event and get through it. But for some reason they completely cut out that last prompt, and all I had to do is just button mash. And it's almost like they needed to get this thing out there right away so that then they can pay all of their attention to The Walking Dead. So the presentation for episode 5 felt just a tad bit rushed. Now, even though the presentation and the story is very different from what Telltale did with The Walking Dead, it is still a Telltale game, so you still, like I just mentioned, you need to rely on QuickTime events and dialogue trees to make decisions and talk to people. But this time, instead of deciding whether or not somebody lives or dies and also study a particular character and navigate through the story like in The Walking Dead, you're simply just trying to figure out a murder mystery. That still involves complex characters that you get to pick, whose brains you get to pick. And one of the things that I really liked about these mechanics that Telltale brought back from The Walking Dead, only this time with some neat little twists, is that the dialogue trees are really good. They're not just black and white answers. There's certain moments where I'm like, man, I wish that I could say something that's in between what's on the square button and on the circle button. And then I look at the option that I have on the triangle button, and it is the middle ground that I was looking for. And I'm like, That's excellent. You put thought into this. And some of the bigger decisions that you get to make as you go through the story are very engrossing because of how invested you become in this mystery, trying to figure out what's going on. Some decisions that involve you going to one place over another first makes all the difference. And that's practically what happens with any detective story, even one that happened in real life, is that sometimes if you have two leads, but you decide to take one first, even if you're going to investigate both of them, if you choose one, the other might dry out, as I like to say, meaning evidence won't be there anymore. The culprit will return to the scene of the crime and clean after him or herself, and so therefore you'll lose your evidence. So they take that approach to some of these decisions, and they made that feel powerful. They made that feel like that mattered, as opposed to, oh, it doesn't matter if I go to one or the other, the story's going to end up the same. No, it does have a certain effect to what happens in later episodes. Not a large enough effect to make the outcome different, because like we figured out recently with The Walking Dead, certain things, despite appearing different, or end up with a similar outcome, and that might just be the case as well with Wolf Among Us. I haven't exactly done research into that, but it made it feel different enough to feel like my choices during those particular moments of investigating this murder mystery mattered. And after every decision, or even after every tiny little thing that you say, you also get to unlock a certain section or page from the Book of Fables. The Book of Fables is this little menu in this little section in the extras menu that you get to go and look up certain things, whether it be bios about certain characters, or mythologies about what works within this world of Fabletown, whether it be the glamour or the certain spells or certain rituals. Even they even go into talking about how a particular funeral works out, and I really like that. It's neat. It's a neat little thing to go after you have beaten the season, and you go back and you dig into some of the background for some of these characters, as well as how the mythology of this world works. It's a neat little thing to go back to and look at after you have beaten the main season. Overall, not only was The Wolf Among Us Season 1 great, but it was a humongous surprise for me, because as much as I loved The Walking Dead, I wasn't sure I was going to get into The Wolf Among Us because it was a different property, but at this point I was trusting Telltale, so I decided to give it a shot, and right after episode 1 I'm like, yes, I'm in. And so it told an impressive story, a detective story that got its hooks into me with great characters, great twists, and just a beautiful world that I cannot wait to revisit, no matter how vulgar or profane it may be. So let me explain how I'm going to rate this. Okay, so it's 5 episodes, and after I beat every episode, I would, in my mind, give it a rating, but I wouldn't officially rate it because I'm not going to review each individual episode because it's already out there. So I just decided to compile it all together and review the whole season as a whole. And so I said to myself, episodes 1 and 5 get a 9 out of 10 for me because I love them that much. 2, 3, and 4 were really great, but I didn't think that they were up to par with those other 2 episodes, so I gave them 8s. So after adding it all up and averaging it out, I came to the conclusion of giving The Wolf Among Us Season 1 a really high 8 out of 10. I think it's great. You should definitely play it if you haven't already. And hopefully there's going to be a Season 2. I'm not sure. I haven't looked it up. I don't know if it's confirmed yet. But I'm pretty sure that between this and The Walking Dead, they're probably going to put this on the back burner and focus on not only their upcoming Game of Thrones game that they said is coming by the end of this year, but also they got Tales of the Borderlands. So yeah, I'm looking forward to not only the next season of The Wolf Among Us, should there be one, but anything else that Telltale puts out at this point, because they got my trust. Don't blow it, TT. Don't blow it. Like Big B would say, don't make me come after you. That was the worst impression of Big B ever. Anyways, thank you guys for watching. Let me know what you guys thought of The Wolf Among Us if you did play it. And if you haven't, I believe the physical copy will be out. I don't know if it's going to come out for the PS3 or the Xbox 360, but I do believe it's coming out for the PS4 and Xbox One. So if you enjoyed my review and would like to get the game or pre-order it at this point, be sure to use the link in the description below. It would really help me out a lot. And I hope you guys have a safe but ultimately fun Halloween. See you later.